Hello everyone and welcome to another video here on my channel. It's been like half a year since the last one, but here we are, and the topic of this video is going to be Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, Final Fantasy VII Remake is my favorite game of all time, and it's now late 2020, so this is hardly news, but I figured I would give it a shot at talking about it. I'm going to talk about it chapter by chapter, just giving my overview and opinions on each chapter, and then tallying it all up and seeing what kind of game came out of it all. The first chapter of the game is the Mako Reactor number 1. In this chapter you get introduced to playing as Cloud and eventually also Barret. You go with Barret and the Avalanche members Jesse, Biggs and Reg to try to blow up the Mako Reactor. I think this is a very good introduction to the game. We get introduced to the motivations of the protagonist with Barret's speeches, and you also get to see a contrast between his extremist personality and Jesse and all the rest of the crew, and how dejected Cloud is from his goals at the beginning. He says that he's just there for money itself. Gameplay wise, it's a very good chapter, and you got a great Scorpion boss battle at the end, and overall it's just pretty fun. Chapter 2, you basically successfully blew up the reactor number 1, but now you're faced with the consequences. Obviously Shinra made the explosion much better than what it actually was, but you're not aware of it, or the characters are not aware of it. So they are faced with the shock of seeing many people's homes destroyed and destroying the people on the top plate. As you escape, you meet Aerith for the first time, and this is the chapter where you start to see deviations on the storyline, because in the original you just meet Aerith and you have the chance to purchase power knot, and then you go about your day. But here you actually see the ghosts for the first time, and you also meet Sakura. So the big changes on the plot are definitely set here. Gameplay wise is very good. You're basically escaping through hordes of Shinra troops, and obviously story wise, as I said, it already sets up a lot for what's to come. After 2 action-packed chapters, in chapter 3 you get to slow down a bit. You get to meet Tifa, your childhood friend. She runs the 7th floor of the Sector 7 slum. You get to meet Marlene, you get to just settle down and meet all the characters in the slums, and you get to get some hard talks. And it's a much more calm chapter than the others. There's not as much excitement, but there's a lot of world building, and it's also a pretty important chapter for Cloud, who ain't really living his Zack fantasy, but instead he is doing regular jobs for people who see him as someone he's not. They see him as this soldier mercenary who came here to help the people. So it's interesting that he does things that he himself says suck, like looking for cats, yet is the moment of the story where he is actually appreciated as someone who is not, which is the image he's trying to put up. Then we get to chapter number 4, which is a totally new addition to the storyline. Jessie convinces Cloud to help her go to the top plate to get a weaker explosives basically, because you're still feeling the guilt of the explosion of the Sector 1 reactor. And as they are about to start their way to the top plate, Biggs and Wedge meet them, and the whole group goes up there, and they have a very wholesome and also very exciting adventure. Obviously you have the bike ride part where you meet Rouge for the first time, and then when you get to top plate you stop by Jessie's house and understand her backstory, what happened to her dad, and then it's a very fun action-packed run through a Shinra, not a Shinra warehouse because you don't actually go in there, Jessie does. You just stay out there being a diversion, and you have another boss battle with Rush, this time not on bike, and you got a lot of mechs and Shinra troops that you face, so definitely a very fun chapter, and Jessie's theme is one of the highlights as far as the soundtrack goes. And yeah, I'm supposed to be scrolling the images relating to the chapters and I'm forgetting. So we go on to chapter number 5. In this chapter, not a lot happens per se. You get some interesting things at the beginning when you're attacked again by the ghosts, and they purposefully injure Jessie so that Cloud has to go on the mission to blow up Mako reactor number 5. But in this chapter you're just making your way again to top side, so your team goes on a train which then gets detected, you guys escape, and then you have to go basically through those huge hallways, and you fight a lot of bugs and Shinra troops. Again, there's not a lot of story happening here, you're just going from place A to place B, but gameplay wise it's fun. You have kind of a maze type of feel in some places, and it's the first time where you get to play with all three characters, Tifa, Barrett and Cloud, all in one team, so it's definitely fun gameplay wise. And obviously the character banter is also really good. Then you get to chapter 6, which continues the adventures of these three, and you basically have an area where you have to take out the power of the lights that light the sector 5 slums, so you can have power I believe to get up to the reactor area. This is also again a very gameplay heavy chapter. This is pretty much a dungeon. You have a lot of puzzly elements where you have a lot of like materials outside where you need to line things up so you can reach, and it's again, gameplay wise is very interesting. You fight a lot of bugs and a lot of like machinery, so you gotta manage your elemental materials for weaknesses. But as far as story progression, it's just going again from place A to place B. Then you get to chapter 7, which is the actual Mako reactor number 5. This one has some similarities to the first chapter, but you got Tifa with you instead of just Barrett, and you got a lot more like side stuff that you can do, like timing mini games wise, and you have a side objectives, and you can also influence the final boss battle by taking away some features from it. The action is pretty fun, and the last boss battle is definitely very exciting. But I'd say it's on par with chapter 1. I have a hard time deciding which one is better. Then we move on to chapter 8 this time. Now I got it right. And in chapter 8, you basically fall from the macro reactor number 5 onto the church of the Sector 5 slums, and that's where you meet Aerith again. And you also, throughout this chapter, meet Reno and Rude from the Turks, so you get to see a different side of Shinra, with more charismatic, some more also down-to-earth villains instead of just the Grumps or Heidinger. And it's just very charming, you getting away from the church and just making your way through Sector 5 with Aerith. You got a lot of great dialogue, you got a lot of character building between the two, and you understand just how good the chemistry between those two characters are. And overall, it's just a joy. You get a lot of side quests like in Chapter 3. Besides that, the gameplay ain't too demanding or intense, besides the boss battles, the one with Reno and with Rude, beginning and ending the chapter. But it's definitely very fun, and just the whole presentation, visuals wise, the church scenes, the plate above, and Aerith's house, it's all definitely very appealing to me so far. It's one of the highlights of the game at this moment. Then we go to chapter 9, which is a lot of people's favorite. So Cloud meets in chapter 8 Aerith's mother, who has seen her daughter get kidnapped by Shinra many times, and she just wants the best for her, so she tells Cloud to leave without Aerith. And Cloud obliges, but as he does, Aerith is one step ahead of him, and she meets him again. So they go on their way up to Sector 7, because that's where Cloud is looking to return, but things take a turn for the unexpected, as after they cross the tunnel, they see that Tifa is being carried, and she's being carried to Sector 6 slums, which is Wall Market. It's not really slums, it's a walled-in entertainment district. And Aerith knows that that ain't a good sign, so Cloud and her go into Sector 6 to try to rescue Tifa, and they go on an amazing run of adventures, from a lot of mini games, hand massages, dancing, to competing in a rigged tournament for Don Corneo. So it's an incredible chapter. It has a lot of world building, has a lot of humor. It puts Cloud in a lot of situations where he's not used to, where he can't play the tough guy or the quiet and serious guy. And you also see Aerith's quirky and humorous side as well. So as far as gameplay, again, it's amazing, the combination of Aerith and Cloud battling through that tournament, and it all culminating with the Hell House battle, which is one of people's favorites, and I definitely agree. So it's definitely a wild ride of a chapter. Then as you rescue Tifa, you three get dropped into the sewers for chapter 10, which is a bit of a, I guess, a slowdown or a change of pace from chapter 9. Chapter 9 was very story heavy, very dialogue heavy. It also had its battles, but it was a pretty long chapter. For chapter 10, it's much more gameplay based, and the main purpose is obviously to introduce a bit of continue the Don Corneo and the Leslie side of the story. Also to start the rumor that they're going to drop the plate on Sector 7 slums, but the main since that's just a rumor and it's mainly shown by Tifa's worry, the main focus on this chapter is building the relationship between Tifa and Aerith, because it's the first time that you got those two characters in the party at the same time. Then we go to chapter 11, which is basically the ghost graveyard or the train graveyard. Ghosts. This area wasn't the original, but it was just like a screen. There wasn't much context. They definitely expanded a lot. At this time, the characters are able to understand that the rumors are true and the Shinra is about to drop the plate. So where the fight begins in this chapter is that it's one of the slowest paced chapters because of all the ghosts and some of the little puzzles that you need to solve, and as well just the pace. A lot of times the characters just walk slowly. So I guess that they were trying to juxtapose the urgency of the situation with all of the obstacles that prevent them from going to Sector 7. But I think in general it just took a bit away from the subplot of the ghosts and the meaning that they had towards Aerith. And it's also a bit, I guess, can be also a bit confusing because at this part of the game you already had met a group of ghosts, and now widely known as the plot ghosts, Arbiters of Fate, or whatever you would call them. So having this group of ghosts is kind of like you at least for me, I was wondering if we would get to understand some kind of relation that the ghosts have to Aerith, but it seems like it's two separate entities. So it wasn't, in this chapter didn't accomplish a lot. Then we go to chapter 12, which is the plate falling. So you play with first Cloud and Tifa, then Cloud, Tifa and Barrett as you go up the Sector 7 tower where they have all set up, the mechanism set up to drop the plate. It's a very gut-wrenching chapter. You see the three supportive characters, Jessie, Biggs and Wedge, supposedly meet their end, and the scenes are pretty emotional, and you get a sense of hopelessness as you battle on going up the tower, and it all culminates with a great boss battle with Reno and Rude together. First Reno is on the ground, then Rude is using the helicopter chopper to shoot down on you, and then you eventually battle both of them on top of the tower. You beat them, but you're not successful in stopping the plate from being dropped. But in the meanwhile, Aerith, which you control for a little bit, is able to save Marlene, and that sets up the final stretch of the game as Marlene is left in safety and Aerith is housed, but Aerith is held captive at Shinra's main building. Then we go to chapter 13, where it's a change of pace and especially a change of mood. Obviously the characters just went through this huge tragedy. They saw their friends being killed, supposedly some, and obviously Barrett is very stressed with Marlene's safety. So what happens is the characters are dropped into sort of an underground base of Shinra with weird experiments, a lot of weird creatures, and you basically pass first with Barrett, then Barrett and Keith, and then you eventually find Cloud again. You're tasked with making your way out of it and getting to the surface again. So again, it goes from a story-heavy chapter in chapter 12 to a more gameplay and experimental type chapter that is meant to carry the game along as we hit the main beats of the original. So you then make it to chapter 14, which is still a bit light on story significance. You have one of three special scenes with either Tifa, Barret, or Aerith, which is one of the best moments of the game. But then the rest of the chapter you'll get to re-explore again the sewers, and you'll understand a bit more of Leslie and Don Corneo's backstory. And it's the last chance for you to do a lot of side quests and just explore the slums again, because after this you go up to the plate to the Shinra building, and things will be much different from then on. Then you get to chapter 15, where you're on the top side and you're going through the wreckage of what happened with the plate drop. This is mainly a gameplay chapter again. You go through little by little until you really reach the Shinra building and you see the sunset. You got a lot of mechs and electrical gadgets and machines from Shinra that you have to take out, and it's definitely very fun and challenging, and it's a really well done dungeon-like chapter where you gotta put a lot of what you learn throughout the game to beat these battles. Use good team synergy, good management of MP and which abilities and spells you need to use. So as far as gameplay goes, it's one of the most appealing chapters to date. Then chapter 16, you're at the Shinra building, and again, usually the game has this kind of roller coaster type of pacing. You went through a very heavy gameplay chapter, and now you enter into a very story and world building chapter as you get to understand a bit more of the Shinra Corporation and their senior staff, basically the villains for the most part. You get to know them, get to know a bit of the story of the company, and also the contrast between the villains and everyone else who works at Shinra and is just a regular person. So obviously one of the highlights of this chapter is choosing the stairs. Definitely a hilarious moment. And also your pursuit of Hojo, which is your lead to find Aerith. Then you get to chapter 17, and this is where the game picks up and doesn't let go until really the end. Like when I was playing this game for the first time and I hadn't played Final Fantasy VII, the original, before, there were many times starting from this chapter onward where I was like, okay, this has to be the end. This is going to be the final boss battle. And obviously it wasn't that this is not the final chapter, but it really picks up. This is really the big final dungeon of the game. Basically you have to battle all of these creatures and experiments that Ojo is overseeing. You got a lot of different type of really enemies. From a lot of them are like animal-esque or creature-esque experiments, but they challenge a lot your team composition. And here at this moment is also where you meet I forget, I'm not sure now if you meet him. You meet Red 13 in chapter 16, but this is, I think, the first time where he actually comes into play, because here you already rescued Aerith, and they split the party into two. So you got Barret and Cloud and Red 13, which is like assisting you, but you can play with him. And on the other side you got Tifa and Aerith. So it's definitely a different kind of team composition. It gives you a lot of challenges through the many boss battles that you come up with. And then as you reach the top of the tower, you see, the revelation that Sephiroth is there, and then he killed President Shinra. You got a great fight with Rufus Shinra, which is a 1-on-1, Cloud versus him, and then you also got the other fight with, which I forget the name, of the mech. So you use Aerith and Barret, and you also have Red 13 assisting you. So the Wild Ride is a big dungeon. You got a lot of different battle scenarios as you switch the parties that you can use. You got a bit of a puzzle element to it, and then the story ramps up with all of the major events, the Barret death, fake out, and the big battle with Rufus, and also with Genova, the first time you battled Genova. Then chapter 18, the last chapter of the game, you escape, the party escapes, and they basically have to go on the highway, and they have to battle Motorball, I think that's the name. So basically you have a big on-rails battle, and if this was following the original game to letter moment by moment, that would be the end of the game. But obviously the remake isn't 100% a remake, so then the big plot moments come in, and you fight Arbingers of Fate, which is basically 3 manifestations of the ghosts that you end up facing, and then they also have a big soldier or warrior-esque like ghost, and this battle is symbolic of you defying fate. So supposedly, now that you defeated the ghosts, you're not tied to this influence trying to make the events of the original re-happen. You're free to influence fate and future as you wish. And then you fight Sephiroth in a great boss battle, which includes some elements that draws from all of your playthroughs. So basically, based on some of your choices, on some of the questions you get asked, and how you tackle, not how you tackle, but if you do certain side quests or not, but you will have access to a different party and different order. So obviously the maximum characters you can have in battle in this game is 3, but the party is all together, so you have a total of 4 playable characters. How the game does is you start the battle 1-on-1 with Sephiroth, you, Cloud, or Sephiroth. Then you can have either Tifa, Aerith, or Barret join you, and then in the first phase you can have the other character join you, and one of them will be left out and will just join you after you beat the final boss, and it's just cutscene. And then as you defeat Sephiroth, you understand that you're not necessarily fighting the toughest Sephiroth or his final form, or he is just enjoying basically his fight, and you don't necessarily thwart his plans. He just basically was having a little bit of fun fighting you, and you understand that you definitely have altered fate in some way, because you and now I mean the player, not necessarily the characters, get access to scenes with Zack supposedly dies in Crisis Core, but in this timeline, or in a certain timeline that exists in Remake, he survives. So then you also see the signs that the other characters, like Jesse and, is it Biggs or Reds? I get their names mixed up. They might be alive. So you get the final statement of the game showing that the story won't be 100% like it was in the original. And you got a lot of intrigue set up for the sequel. So to summarize, we are able to see through this breakdown that the game has a very purposeful structure as far as how they set up the key story events and also how they space out gameplay. As you can see, you usually have like a very intense gameplay chapter followed by a mix of gameplay and story, and then you get a more story dialogue heavy chapter, and then they kind of they use this formula throughout the game. Obviously they don't have to do this 1, 2, 3 sequence right away, but for the most part they keep using this formula and they keep ramping up the gameplay and the significance of the events. And I think it's a very rewarding game. I think that in general people are a bit hesitant on giving it its flowers because of some elements of the story that people don't agree, and also the fact that it's part one of a trilogy. But I think as a standalone game, I think it's one of the best Final Fantasy games you can get. And honestly, I think it's one of the best games you can get for current systems. The gameplay is addicting, it's super fun. I never got bored of the gameplay wise, the story and the characters, mainly the characters, like the interactions. Maybe what they do moment to moment isn't fascinating for everyone, but just their banter, the way they interact, I think it's very charming. And I think that also artistically, like soundtrack and visuals, the game is beautiful. It's very enticing, very appealing to see all the different kind of styles, and I think they definitely did a great job in expanding the base that they had for the original game, and I'm very excited to see what's to come. So that was my breakdown of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I hope you're not sleeping yet, and I hope you enjoyed it.